Welcome to Cinemafile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemafilepod.com. Winner of the Cinema and Arts Award at this year's Venice Film Festival, as well as recently being shortlisted for consideration for this year's Oscar for Best Documentary Feature, The Tale of Silyan is a poignant and visually arresting story set in the heart of North Macedonia. Nikola, a farmer grappling with the harsh realities of new government policies, finds himself unable to sell his land or his crops. When his family leaves in search of a better life abroad, Nikola takes a job as a landfill attendant where he encounters an injured white stork, Silyan. That sets in motion a beautiful film that is touching and intimate. It's about redemption, family, and folklore. We're joined today by the director-producer Tamara Kotevska, as well as the cinematographer-producer Jean Dakar. Welcome to Cinemafile.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for this film. As I told Tamara when I spoke with her last, how much I loved Honeyland. It's still one of my favorite documentaries. And both of these films have in common an inordinate amount of patience and an ability to essentially understand a good story and good characters, good people, I should say, in the telling of that story. Tamara, I'll start with you in terms of how did you get to know this wonderful family?
The storks actually brought us to this family. So we were following the storks, and first we started with the landfills. We showed how they're feeding from the landfills, and then we wanted to make the comparison how they naturally usually feed for past centuries, which is in symbiosis with the human farmers. So we encountered a lot of farmers along the way in these fields, and one of these farmers was Nicola's family.
Did you know that? When did you know that you wanted to get to know him? And when you began to get to know his family, at what point did you say to yourself, this is something that I want to be around for the next however long it took for you to put this film together? When did you know in that sort of process?
Well, it took a while, maybe 6 to 8 months before the idea matured that I want to make a comparison between the humans and the stork families.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were selected out of around 10 farming families.
So that was a process that you put together to sort of vet everybody that you thought might be a good subject. And it's a great family story, and it's a great tale, and we'll get into the tale of Silyan in that way, in the way that it plays out in the film. Jean, when did you come into this project?
I'd say I was there right from the start. I mean,
Yeah.
we both discovered that storks are changing their migratory patterns, which is a very strange phenomenon since storks are migratory birds. And so we wanted to find out why that is the case. I had my camera with me at the time, and we went out and started researching. And this is where we discovered that storks are predominantly feeding from landfill sites now, which is essentially an open buffet for these birds, which are usually predatory. And this is one of the reasons why storks stopped migrating to Africa, taking a 10,000 kilometer journey south, because they usually there's a motivation of feeding, which in the winter, the kind of animals that they're hunting are not around. Since that problem is solved now with the 24/7 open buffet, the storks stop migrating. And yeah, and at one point we were in the middle of it. We're focusing on shooting a short film, actually, a short documentary about the storks, about this topic. However, we then eventually met Nikola and his family, and it just kind of became into something bigger.
When did you become aware of this folklore surrounding storks? Did you know that before you met the family?
Absolutely not. I mean, I knew the story since I was a child. but it didn't come to my mind to use this story until very late in the process, after Nikola captured his stork.
Hmm.
And then when he decided to live with the stork and take care of the stork, this tale just came naturally as part of the film.
This film is about not only this family and their struggles and the struggles of the storks as the world around them changes, but this is very much about the world we live in. Globalization plays a very important part in terms of the trajectory of their ability to feed themselves, to make a living as farmers. And as Jean, you just mentioned, the idea of migration is changing. So there's an environmental or climate related element to this. So I was struck by how much the outside world had the impact it did on this family and how that part of the story illuminates so much more about the world we live in. Sort of an unexpected part of the film for me in that in relation to that particular story. How intentional did you become in essentially highlighting that as over the course of the editing and I guess putting the film together, Tamara? No, go ahead. But just the intention of sort of highlighting this sort of bigger outside world and the impact it's having on their family.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is not just a Macedonian problem. Farmers all around the world are seriously struggling for their livelihood. I'm talking about the individual, local farmers.
Yeah.
It's not always for the same reasons, but just simply the existence of local farmers globally is being threatened massively. Obviously, well, in Macedonia, the farmers are struggling because it's almost like false promises. Farmers would start off the year with a certain number of products that they're going to be sold
Hmm.
throughout the year, which at the end of the time, when it comes to the harvest, this number is changing. So there's that sort of betrayal. But mostly the comparison, to be honest, that struck me the most was how farmers who start working on the landfill side is, storks are following them almost.
Just to watch Nikola in his relationship with the stork and how that plays out in terms of the telling of the story, it really resonates. And I found him to be such a compelling in unexpected ways. Did it surprise you as well?
I mean, yes, it was a great surprise, the relationship they built, definitely.
Mm.
It wasn't expected, and it was just part of the magic of the film when reality speaks louder than your ideas, And to witness this over months, how this relationship progresses and becomes almost like between two humans, it was really spectacular.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the film. The reaction, has this film been seen in Macedonia? Has it been seen where obviously the family's probably seen the film, but I'm just curious about the reaction to the film in Macedonia, Northern Macedonia and in that area.
Well, the family saw the film. We went to present it in their house, and they were mind blown by the film. They really loved it. There was a lot of tears, joy, and they just loved how we actually presented them in the film, which they couldn't imagine before.
I can imagine that. Well, Jean Dakar, I want to ask you about in the filming of this. It looks like this took a tremendous amount of patience in terms of just being there present to capture what was going on with Nikola, but also being around this stork who is the centerpiece of the film. I can't imagine how much time you spent in getting all of the footage we see in this film. What was your secret, if you will, to being there and being able to capture what we see in the film?
Honestly, the most important thing was obviously the trust that you would establish with between you and your stork characters. I mean, the same is, really applied to the humans as well. But the difference is that with storks, you can't really negotiate about you know, it's purely about trust and for them to know that you're not a threat and you're just a harmless observer. Because if that's not the case, then you're not really going to capture anything useful, even if you're forcing yourself up close when, let's say, this trust hasn't been established yet, you're just not going to get materials of, storks, being natural in front of the camera, let's say.
Yeah.
So what happened is that we were filming the storks for about 3 years.
Wow.
Obviously, we started purely focusing on the storks right in the beginning of the project, but then we continued filming them even when we were, focused on the human story as well. We focused on a handful of stork nests in the country. And, with the help of a converted camper van, we managed to stay and live with each nest for for an extended period of time. Because some of the equipment that we used, what was important is that we wanted to be physically really close to them. I mean, it's just a completely different feeling, having the camera physically much closer to your subject using, wider lenses. It's just creating a much more intimate feeling. But that's obviously making it increasingly harder to actually execute, because one of the tools that we used to get up close was essentially a drone, which in itself is quite an obtrusive piece of equipment. It's making a lot of noise. It's flying in a very unnatural way. But since storks tend to fly back to the same nest year after year, it gave us the chance to actually get to know each other for an extended period of time. But it was essentially especially the storks that grew up with us, and those were about 3 generations of storks.
Wow.
That knew from the very start that this drone or us, as filmmakers and our equipment is not a threat, but it's just part of their life in a way.
Yeah. One of the more surprising things you learned about storks in this journey, in terms of their bonding or their habits, as you were describing, is there something that jumps out at you in terms of their behavior or their culture, if you will?
I mean, honestly, in terms of behavior, there was plenty of things, but it was something else. It felt a little bit more magical than that, honestly, because
Yeah.
when you're up close to these birds, you manage to get, a close glimpse of their eyes, even, you start feeling something strange. It's interesting because, storks have been part of human fascinations for thousands of years in that region. There's plenty of tales and mythologies about storks, essentially the tale of Silyan being one of them. But I feel like if you up close to this animal and you look him right in the eyes, you just have that feeling that this animal wants to tell you a story. And if you also think that most of them still migrate, 20,000 kilometers every year, and going through the entire world, it just feels like these eyes of this stork has seen probably way more than you ever will. So
Yeah.
that was just something that I really wanted to capture right in the beginning of the scene with the campfire, before, which in the end, Tamara and editor Martin did really well to actually have that in front of, before this tale actually starts. But yeah, in terms of behavior, they're opportunistic animals, which is what has helped them survive for thousands of years, which is the symbiosis that they have, established with the humans. Storks predominantly, build their nests on human artifacts, or like roofs, telephone poles, etc. They are there to eat the pests of the farmers, and this is a win-win situation for both, humans and storks. But it's also this opportunistic behavior, instinct that is now causing them misery, which is finding that, on the landfill there's an easier food source than, on lands, especially since the farming activity is getting less. And the problem there is obviously that they can consume, plastics and rubbers.
Yeah.
Plastic strings can get entangled on their legs and wings, cutting off the blood circulation, and this is a lot of misery that's happening there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that answer. But thank you so much for this film. It is a beautiful film to look at, and a tale. They're majestic creatures in flight. They really are beautiful to observe and to see the interaction we see in the film with everyone, every living being that they're near. It's just a wonderful film on all counts. Film again, The Tale
Yeah.
of Silyan, and we've been joined today by the director and producer Tamara Kotevska, as well as the cinematographer and producer, Jean Dakar. To both of you, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much
you.
for having us.
Thank you.